Welcome to the farm.
Welcome to the farm. I'm Justin, and this is day 3 of our Duramax head gasket change. In the last video, we left off removing some parts on top of the engine here that we probably didn't need to remove, but they're removed, out of the way. Hopefully that'll help us out with lifting the heads out of here, because that's going to be a tight fit and a struggle. But today we're going to start back up where we left off with trying to get that main fuel rail removed out of the driver's side. Oh, well, that sucked. There we go. All right. All right. Ooh. Now we got those fuel lines out of the way, I think we're finally ready to take this fuel rail out. And it should be just 4 bolts, 2 for this heat shield, and then 2 for the unit itself. So now our next step is to remove our injectors. So I got to remove the bolt here for our hold down clamp. All right, so now I need to carefully pop this injector out. And there we go. Injector. So now our next step is to remove the rocker arm cover, which should be all these bolts here. So now we got the upper rocker arm cover off, we can remove the lower rocker arm cover, which should be just 16 bolts. So now that we got our upper and lower valve covers removed, the next thing we need to do is remove our 4 glow plugs. There we go. So the next thing I need to do is right back here where my finger is, I got to take out these 3 bolts to disconnect the exhaust manifold from the crossover pipe. And what I'm going to do is grab a really big extension, really long extension, and get it from underneath the truck, hopefully right through here, onto those bolts. Well, unfortunately those bolts are kicking my butt. I got the 3/8 impact on there with a long extension, and I was just hammering away on that bolt and it would not budge. I don't want to put my 1/2 inch impact on it because I don't have extensions and swivels the right size and everything, and I know if I put my 1/2 inch impact I'll just snap everything. But I did put my 1/2 inch breaker bar in there and gave it all I had, and it would not break loose. I also tried the 2 other bolts with double wrenches pulling down on them. They wouldn't break loose. So I soaked them down in penetrating oil, same with the other side. I'm gonna let those sit for a couple days, maybe hit them again here shortly, next day or 2. And then next weekend, I'll get some 1/2 inch equipment and we'll see if we can't break that loose. We are so close to having that head out. All we got left is those 3 bolts, the 5 bolts for the rocker arm, lift the rocker arm out, lift out the push rods, loosen all the head bolts, and lift the head out. Hopefully it goes that easy. All right, so we're 4 days later. I have soaked those bolts down on both sides of the engine, driver's side and passenger side, 3 times. They've been soaking. I'm gonna squirt them again today before we start trying to work on them. But I also picked up a bunch of various things here. I got a longer 25-inch breaker bar, so hopefully we can get a lot of force by hand. I also picked up some 1/2 inch drive sockets, so I don't have to worry about putting my big 1/2 inch drive impact wrench on there and breaking the 3/8 drive ones. I also got a 1/2 inch drive impact swivel, and then I picked up some long 1/2 inch drive extensions. I got a 24-inch extension and 2 10-inch extensions, and hopefully with all of these things and spraying them all down, we can get those things broken loose today. I got 1 bolt out down in the bottom corner here. You can see my thumb, it's just on the opposite side of the flange there. I'm gonna have to move the camera to get the other 2, and I'll catch up with you when I'm done. Well, that was a pain in the butt, but I got the 3 bolts out on the driver's side. The other real difficult part of that is there's a heat shield that goes around the exhaust, and it doesn't give you enough room to get a socket on to break these loose. So I ended up having to take my 13mm wrench and then a bigger wrench, locking them together and putting as much force as I could put on them to break them loose. But then even taking the top 2 bolts out, I had to pry the exhaust off the manifold to get enough room to loosen the bolts out to pull these things out. But I got the driver's side done. I'm gonna head over and do the passenger side right away, which should be a lot easier. We have a lot more access to it. So on the passenger side, 2 of the bolts were really easy to get loose. All I had to do was put the socket on, breaker bar, snap, they're loose. There's one that's kind of tucked up back behind that's really hard to get to. It's got the tube that I'm trying to take loose coming down, and it's got the big exhaust tube coming down right next to it. And then where those bottom 2 bolts on that flange mount is actually a bracket that comes down and holds the main exhaust tube. And that bracket is in the way of being able to get a wrench or a socket or anything in there. I can almost get it with this setup with the socket and a little swivel head, but it's just a little bit too long this way. And I don't have any metric just swivel sockets, which would end up being a little bit shorter, and I think that's what I'm gonna need to get in there. So I'm gonna go pick up a 13mm swivel socket, so hopefully we can snake it right through there and get this thing loose. And I can tell you, after these last 2 days working on this thing, I can see why it would be easier just to lift the cab off the truck, which is what a lot of the videos I kind of saw did. I didn't watch those videos because I wasn't gonna lift the cab, but I think getting the cab out of the way, you'd have a lot more access to everything. Unfortunately, I don't have a lift or any lifting mechanism to lift the cab off and out of the way. So that's why I'm doing it this way. But I'm hoping if I get that other socket, I can get that bolt loose and then we can move on from there. So yesterday I went to pick up some sockets, and by the time I got back, it was too dark to do any recording, but I did get this flange loose, and what I ended up picking up was just some regular swivel sockets themselves and a small extension. And I was able to sneak it between these two exhaust pipes back here, get it on the bolt. Then I had my 1/2-inch breaker bar on there, and I put everything I had into that to break it loose. But I finally got it out. I got those 3 bolts out, so now our exhaust flange is loose on both sides. So we're getting super close to being able to pull this head off. The next thing we need to do is remove our valve rocker arm assembly. And our first step is to loosen the lock nuts. To remove tension on the set screw. And then turn to relieve tension on the rocker arm. So up next we get to remove our rocker arm bolts, and this is the sequence we need to remove them in. I'm going to go ahead and loosen them in that sequence first before I back them all the way out. And then once I get them loosened, then I'll go back and pull the bolts completely out in that order. Now I can remove my push rods and my crossover rocker. So next we need to remove the ground strap going to the head, and the directions show it coming off the head itself. I don't really feel like trying to get back up in there to loosen it, so I'm just going to loosen it here and hopefully take that out with the head. So I'm to the point now where I'm ready to start loosening all the head bolts and getting ready to take the head out. And I gotta take them out in a certain sequence again, which is listed here, and it's basically the opposite sequence of when you install in torque. And I'm gonna do the same thing I did last time. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna break everything loose, and then I'm gonna work on taking everything out in the same sequence. Alright, so I'm running out of daylight here, but this thing should, in theory, be loose and ready to come out. Now, the video I watched, there was 2 guys that lifted this thing out of here as an assembly, and I don't have a ton of room, so hopefully I can get this out by myself. No. Oh. Oh, come on. Well, this video was 3 days in the making, but we finally got the head out on the workbench. I think we found our smoking gun too, between the bolt here that's all rusted on the shank, and right where that bolt was, I can see this little piece of metal. I don't know how well you guys can see, but there's a crack going from the cylinder right to that hole. So I'm guessing that's where our failure was. I don't know how that got into the water jacket and getting exhaust into the coolant, but that was definitely a problem. So hopefully in the next video we can start working on getting this head cleaned up, fixed up, get the block cleaned up, fixed up, and ready to put that head back on the block. Hopefully you guys found this interesting, entertaining, and you learned something. I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.